And welcome to another episode of Ardent Cinema, the #1 podcast for a book club style discussion of all things movies. This is a weekly podcast, and we encourage you to follow along as we take a deep dive into each movie's plot, overall themes, what we thought of the acting and directing, our feelings on the film, and more. At the end of each episode, we will announce the movie for next week, so make sure to listen until the end. I am your scented host, Sean.
I am your hooah host, Daniel.
Al Pacino.
Welcome to the show. Soy Alejandro de España, no hablo español. This week, we hope you watch along with us for Scent of a Woman, 1992.
Hi, Mrs. Rossi. I'm here about the weekend job.
Come on in. They put him in a veteran's home, but he hated it.
Colonel's a gentleman.
A real hero.
This is some guy.
Down deep, the man is a lump of sugar.
Get in here, you idiot. What do you want here?
I want a job.
I promise you an easy $300.
I don't get an easy feeling.
Get out my dress blues. They're in a garment bag in the closet. Don't shrug, you imbecile. I'm blind. Our destination is New York City. Women are the essence of life. She's wearing florists. Fleur de Rocaille. Ogilvy Sisters soap.
That's amazing.
Well, I'm in the amazing business.
I should be getting back to school.
Ooh. I don't think you're gonna make it.
You said that the last shuttle leaves at 10 o'clock.
I lied.
Scent of a woman.
Hoo-ah.
Directed by Martin Brest and written by Bo Goldman. You may know Martin Brest from his work on Midnight Run and Beverly Hills Cop. Funnily enough, when I had seen Midnight Run, I thought to myself that it was a worse version of Beverly Hills Cop. I think I'd mentioned it to one of you two.
No, really. Beverly Hills Cop is my favorite movie ever. So, okay, I'm starting to see some similarities.
There you go. Huh. Starring Al Pacino as Lieutenant Colonel Frank Slade, Chris O'Donnell as Charlie Sims, James Redhorn as Mr. Trask. Charlie Sims is attending Baird Prep School on a scholarship and takes a job watching over a grizzled warlord so he can buy a ticket home for the holidays. You'll laugh, you'll cry, and maybe you'll learn something along the way. Break off a slice of Thanksgiving cheer and bite into Scent of a Woman.
Hoorah!
Who would like to start with their impressions?
I'll start. Overall, I really enjoyed the film. It's definitely a one-man show. I mean, it's Al Pacino's movie, basically, and Chris O'Donnell's along for the ride, kind of just reacting to all of Frank's, wild antics.
He's the stunned civilian.
Yes. Well, he is our inroad into this world, basically. This, kind of weird...
Our surrogate?
Yeah, the audience surrogate. Thank you. That's a good term for that. He's our surrogate for, Frank's adventures, basically, in his mindset.
Almost our, silent protagonist at many times.
I mean, for the first,
I was gonna say
hour and
Autobot.
Yeah. Well, to be honest, the first hour and a half, I mean, he was damn near silent. He basically just kind of grunted and reacted, and it would just be very meek. But only, the back half of the film did he really start to grow into himself and be more assertive and actually, have some more dialogue beyond just reacting to what's being said. So, but anyways, overall, I really enjoyed it. I liked their journey. It was a bit tough to watch in the beginning because of how much Frank really bristled against Charlie. And, that dynamic was again, kind of tough to watch at first, but it really grew on me over time.
What are you, dying of some wasting disease? Get in here, you idiot. What I'm looking for is some indication of a brain, intelligence, of which you have none. How's your skin, son? I like my aids to be presentable.
I've had a few zits.
The History of My Skin by Charles Sims. You patronizing me, Pee-wee? Is that what you're doing? You sharpshooting me, punk? Don't you sharpshoot me. What do you want?
I want a job so I can make, my plane fare home for Christmas.
Hoo-ah! Too much football without a helmet? Ah. Glory, glory, hallelujah. Dismissed.
Yeah. I had a pretty good time with it. I found it entertaining throughout, despite it being a 2.5-hour movie. I was never bored. I did, however, cringe every now and then, and we'll get into that. What about you, Danny? What did you think?
I mean, I liked it overall, but I have to admit the first quarter of the movie I was not really enjoying.
Really? You were bored?
No, it's not that I was bored. It was more so that I felt like a lot of the characters were way over the top. Just like when they introduced all the students, I didn't like any of their characters.
I thought they came off as pretty naturalistic and not over the top. So I'm surprised
Really?
to hear you say that. Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know. For me, it felt like even Philip Seymour Hoffman, who, well, he plays quite a minor role.
Uh-huh.
I felt like he was overdoing it as well. And actually, I read some interviews and some articles, and he agrees to that about himself. That was actually his breakout role.
Well, if you didn't like it in the beginning, I don't think you like it at any point because they pretty much stay the same. The students are always at that same level.
Yeah. No, I never really. I mean, it worked better for the ending of the film, so it felt like it blended in better. And I was, I guess, already used to the characters, but in the beginning, it was a bit of a shock. And when you first meet Al Pacino's character Frank, also, I just felt like he was way over the top. Like it just felt like too much in my face. And with the contrast of Charlie not saying barely a word, it was just like really frustrating.
Yeah, I think it was a 5-minute monologue, something like that. It was a lot. I do get used to it, but by the end, like we had said, it's a fairly long movie. I was getting a little bit grated by that tonality and that inflection that he was doing. I needed a break from it.
Hoo-ah! Talking about the overwhelmingness, so to speak, of Frank and his characterization, what do you guys think about movies where it's basically a one-man show? Because for all intents and purposes, this is a one-man show. While Charlie was integral to the movie, he wasn't really the driving force of it at all. And it's basically Frank's story. So do you guys enjoy movies like this? Or is it maybe dependent on the lead actor?
It's on a case-by-case basis. They have to be able to carry it. I love one-man movies and character studies. There's a couple movies that I love that are literally one character just talking throughout.
Oh, really?
Uh-huh.
Or the movie with Tom Hardy, him in the car. What
Locke.
was that called? Locke.
Yeah, it's one of my favorites.
Yeah, it's a super great movie. And you actually, I'm pretty sure you only see him on screen, like just him in a car on a phone.
Oh, wow.
Making phone calls. That's the entire movie, but he can carry it,
Well, because he's got a lot of range in that role, obviously. Yeah. And that's not to say Al Pacino doesn't have range. We clearly know he does with his filmography. But for whatever reason, the director or his choice, they made a decision to only have a very narrow range with this character. And it's a lot for a 2.5-hour movie.
It is a lot. As I said earlier, I definitely was a bit uncomfortable by his dialogue and the way that he treated Charlie for like the first 30 minutes or so. But he grew on me over time as he grew on Charlie over time. Like I felt like I felt a lot like Charlie in that instance, just kind of reacting to this kind of kooky old man, kind of asserting his dominance, so to speak, and slowly, him engendering himself to me, or to Charlie in this case, and being a lot more thoughtful about like, okay, yeah, he's got some eccentricities, but I think overall this guy has some heart there. So for me, I guess to answer my own question from earlier, I think it really depends on the lead actor. I really like Al Pacino, so for me, this film was like, okay, I see what he's doing. A lot of the characterization in the film was almost heightened. It didn't seem like it was naturalistic, I guess, to like jump off a point you were talking about earlier. It felt more heightened. It felt kind of dramatic, like it was a actual comedy or drama. Where like people's reactions and interactions are a bit more heightened than usual. At least that's my take on it. And I think that kind of helped the film, because otherwise if it was a little more dry character study, I felt like I would have lost interest about an hour and a half through.
Yeah, I don't see it as a character study, this movie, honestly. We never learned much about Frank. It's more just an exploration of this specific story of this time in his life. But
it's a bit of an exploration of how both of these characters meet and how both of their weaknesses and strengths lend to each other.
So despite it being very much a one-man show, I don't think it was a character study of Frank. It definitely was a dynamic duo.
Yeah.
Almost a road trip type movie.
Absolutely. Another thing, when Charlie first goes to take the job of, becoming the caretaker for Frank, the way that Frank's family was setting Frank up, or introducing him almost, I don't know if you guys agree, but to me it felt like they were almost describing like this like decrepit old man that Charlie would need to walk daily and, you know, to take care of, like he was very incapable.
Yeah.
But then when he walks in the door and you see Al Pacino, he looks very young and healthy.
Yeah, I was thrown off by that too a bit. I think it would have been served better if he was 10 years older.
Yeah, I feel like the Al Pacino, even of today, it would have worked much better. It's like an old veteran.
And he was very physically capable too.
Yes, exactly. So it kind of took it away from me, that feeling.
Yeah, I was right there with
that
him.
he couldn't take care of himself.
They put him in a veteran's home, but he hated it. So I told my dad that we'd take him. Before you go in, do you mind my telling you a few things? Don't sir him. Don't ask him too many questions. And if he staggers a little when he gets up, don't pay any attention.
I read that differently, actually. It's clear that Frank and the rest of the family have a bit of a contentious relationship. I mean, the way that he describes, you know, his daughter and even, you know, his son-in-law and like his grandkids, again, very contentious. Seemingly not a very like positive relationship there to some extent. And I see her description of him more as, you know, she's finally getting away from him for a few days, you know, going to Albany. And, you know, she's just kind of over Frank and his dealings with the family and with herself. You know, she still loves him, obviously. But at the same time, you know, she's just kind of like, this is your problem now. So the way that I took her description of Frank was less of he is literally incapable of taking care of himself. More so, he is such in many cases, a very odious person that he can take care of himself, but he almost refuses to. You know, like he's just kind of wasting away, basically, and he's becoming a very negative presence in their life. So I took it less of like in a literal sense, but more like a mental sense. Right?
Sure.
Right. I mean, I agree with that, but I just feel like the dialogue could have presented it a little bit better. It should have been more like, oh, hey, you know, I'm just trying to get away from this. I'm just trying to do a getaway because he's a little bit hard to deal with and all that. Sure. Not that he's like...
It sounded like they were setting up a villain almost.
Right.
Yeah.
Exactly. So I just kind of wish that the dialogue was just done a little bit better there to show the situation.
Yeah, it was definitely subtle. I mean, she mentions at one point like she finally gets to get away with the kids and her husband for a weekend, but you kind of have to infer, okay, why does she want to get away? Well, Frank.
If you don't mind, I want to describe the inciting incident here. Charlie and George, one of his classmates, witness Trent, Jimmy, and Manny setting up a booby trap, and they're witnessing this by Mrs. Hunsaker. The trap involves a balloon filled with, I don't know what, mayonnaise or something that gets... Milk? Maybe milk. It looked a little bit thicker than milk.
I thought it was paint.
Milk. Paint, milk, or mayonnaise in an inflated balloon that is filled up over Mr. Trask's car. And it blows up, gets all over him. And he then gives Charlie an ultimatum, which is either you tell me who it was that you saw, and I'll give you a guaranteed full ride to Harvard, or I'm taking away your scholarship for this high school. Because they're like at a preparatory high school.
And I'm expelling you.
Did he say he was doing that?
Not at the time. No, he didn't say that at the time.
He said before, okay, so it was both Philip Seymour Hoffman's character, George. Yeah. So it was George and Charlie that went to the dean's office.
Right. Then they asked George to leave.
But before that, he told both of them, if one of you don't say something, you're both expelled. That's what he said.
I don't remember that. I remember they would be disciplined, but not. I don't think he said explicitly expelled. But I don't know. I could have forgotten.
Are you sure? Because he can't even expel the 3 students for circumstantial evidence. You sure he can just?
Pretty sure he threatened to expel them.
First thing Monday morning, I'm convening a special session of the Student Faculty Disciplinary Committee. Nothing will transpire at this institution until that proceeding is concluded. And if at that time we are no further along than we are now, I will expel you both.
So either way, that sets it up so that Charlie has this problem in the back of his head that he's then going to confide in with Frank throughout this journey, and that's going to kind of build. So there's your B plot that's happening in the background.
So talking about that subplot, I guess the first thing I noticed about it that kind of bothered me was that in the very beginning of the movie, they never made Mr. Trask seem like villainous type character, or that he was unlikable.
I don't know if that was a problem with the movie. I think that's just that tells us that those characters are assholes.
Yeah, and in the beginning, actually, when they're like all like disrespecting him when he arrives with his new car that the board of trustees gives him, they're clearly like kind of talking like down to him, or like he can tell they're insulting him.
Yeah, they're condescending him.
But he takes it like, well, like he handles it pretty respectively, respectfully, and I'm like, okay, like, why are you guys hating on this guy? Like, I kind of felt bad at first. So
no, these are just rich jerks looking to take it out on somebody.
So yeah, I don't know if that. What do you guys think? Do you guys think that played to the movie or played against it, making the character kind of seem more neutral?
It's tough because the ending court scene or disciplinary scene, I'm thinking to myself, like, yes, there are stakes in this in terms of Charlie's opportunity to like go to Harvard or not and potentially getting expelled. I kept thinking to myself, like, why doesn't he just turn these guys in? It's like they, as Charlie puts it, they're not really friends. They're just people he knows, and they're jerks.
Oh, they're absolutely not. They actually invite him skiing at one point, only because they know he can't afford it. Like they're actively antagonistic towards them. But they're not. They're being rich snobs about it. They're not putting it in his face.
I think what the movie was trying to get at is because Mr. Trask is like the leader of the school, you have in your mind that, the school administrator or whomever, the dean, however you want to call him, he is like that kind of character is always antagonistic with the students. But yeah, no, he's relatively pleasant. I get the idea that the film wants to show that like he got this fancy gift from the board of trustees that maybe he didn't deserve. But at the same time, the people who tell him he doesn't deserve it are even richer than he is.
Right.
So it's like, you shouldn't be the ones telling him that.
Yeah.
Like if it was Charlie saying like, hey, that's a really nice car you got, and he started talking to him about like the ethics of that, then I would understand and I'd be like, okay, I more get that.
No, definitely. I don't see the problem with the principal of a high school full of millionaires having a Jaguar. I don't see what the issue is.
So do you guys think it would have been better if maybe he was portrayed as a little bit more antagonistic from the beginning?
I think so. I think that's part of why the ending doesn't super work for me, because I'm kind of on his side.
Yeah, a little bit. I think I think what they tried to do in this film is they tried to really use the bribe as the evil move, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Like it's not the fact that you're snitching on this group of rich kids, or the fact that you're trying to side with Mr. Trask. It's really, are you willing to sell yourself?
Yeah. I think the good or evil about it is the principle of writing, not the specific scenario.
Or the principle of that you're for sale, basically. Right. So I think that's really what's the actual, the moral question.
But I think they could have sold that dilemma a little bit better.
Definitely.
Yeah. Frank says it almost explicitly during that last like court scene or whatever. It's like, I don't know if what Charlie's done is right, but he should be commended for not, basically taking the bribe. And that for Frank and for the audience and for the director is saying like that's the badness. That's the thing that doesn't work.
Yeah, actually I wrote this down. He specifically says, I don't know if Charlie's silence here today is right or wrong. I'm not a judge or jury, but I can tell you this. He won't sell anybody out to buy his future. I really like that line. And what a crazy situation where like the board is willing to expel Charlie just because he doesn't even.
I had a thought about that.
He didn't commit the crime, and he's saying he didn't see them. So what do you?
I have a thought about that too, but go ahead.
So yeah, that's another thing that actually doesn't make the ending work as well for me as this big celebratory moment, as I don't think they would have expelled him regardless if it was down to a board decision versus just Mr. Trask.
I read that as George's father, George Willis Sr., had talked to Mr. Trask, and maybe or maybe not the board, because when they're deciding, or rather, when Mr. Trask is deciding, the suitable punishment for everybody, he's basically saying, the trio of boys, can't do much about them, but then George, he should still be commended for, being still a true like Baird man. But then they pile it all on Charlie. He's basically the fall guy here. And at least for me, I get that sense throughout the film that Frank's trying to warn him, like, hey, this supposed buddy of yours, he's going to go talk to his father. He's going to basically rat you out. He's going to basically, throw you under the bus. Like, you are the fall guy here, and you shouldn't take that. So I read that more as George's father's asserting his will here and saying, not only are you not going to damage my son's reputation, but then you're going to make this other guy the fall guy because of the fact that, he kind of bristled at the thought of, ratting these people out or even taking the bribe to begin with.
I want to make a note about, I know this is such a tiny note,
Sure.
but George Sr., I thought that was not a good casting for George Sr. One, because he didn't look anything like
They did not look
his son.
alike at all.
At all. And he didn't seem imposing and authoritative at all. Like, and the whole time throughout the movie, you're kind of thinking about him a little bit because they're like, oh, they're going to call his father. His father's just...
He's a boogeyman.
He's the boogeyman, yeah, kind of thing. And then you see him, and it's almost like he has like barely any power over his son.
It was actually exactly what I expected. He was just a snobbish rich jerk. I didn't see him as the boogeyman being built up. I guess I always kind of expected that letdown.
Yeah, no, yeah, I was always thinking like, oh man, this guy's gonna come later into the movie and like cause some problems.
Oh yeah,
yeah,
very nearly does.
What do you guys think about Frank's radar-like hearing and his excellent hearing comprehension? Some of the things he catches, like the false salute, or him asking them to water down their drink. I almost thought at one point that there was going to be a revelation that he was faking his blindness.
Dude, at one point in the hotel towards the end, Charlie asks, "Are you looking at me?"
Right. I was like, "Here it comes. Here it comes."
And he said, "Yeah, I've been faking this whole time." I was expecting. I was like, he's just like, "No, I'm blind." I was like, "Oh, they just dropped that. What a weird scene to add there."
Yeah.
There's a part in the beginning of the movie where Charlie first meets Frank, and Frank, I guess he asks him a question, and then Charlie just shrugs, and he immediately goes, "Don't shrug, you imbecile. I'm blind. Save your body language for the bimbai."
Yeah.
Which again, like, how did he know he shrugged? Did he just sense the air movement or something like that?
Who knows?
Just paranoid that, oh, this kid is gonna be insulting me. He's gonna shrug at me.
But
then you'd imagine that paranoia would mean he's guessing wrong a lot of the times.
Or he's had a lot of other helpers in the past, and probably through experience, he knows, he's probably given a similar speech.
That's what I mean.
To people. Yeah, so that, he could just tell, like, okay, they're going to shrug now because they don't believe me, this and that. So I think, that might be more of a learned experience.
I want to talk about the scene where Frank and Charlie visit Frank's brother and their family. Frank's nephew, Randy, throws a lot of mean jabs at Frank, but I thought I was actually completely on his side. I thought Frank was way over the bounds the entire time. Like, even immediately, he's rude to his nephew.
Who is this?
It's Randy.
You knew?
I'm your nephew.
Still with Snow Queen Sugar?
Snowflake. Why do you always get that wrong?
Because it's not important for me to get it right. What are you doing there now?
I'm vice president for marketing.
Hoo-ah! Congratulations. Sugar is shit, though. I told General Abrams install honey in the commissaries. Ah,
Frank.
Gloria!
Gail.
Of course. It's all right, Gloria. I enjoy Randy's observation.
My
His
wife's name is
sense of-
Gail, Frank.
Gail strikes me as a very beautiful woman. But there's a little tension in her voice. Be careful. When the wife gets restless, wife gets racy.
What's your point, Uncle Frank?
Could be one of two things. Either Gail is nervous or unsatisfied. You ought to go down on her. And you've gotten so wrapped up in the sugar business, you've forgotten the taste of real honey.
Frank, for God's sake.
Hear that voice? There's fire under that dress.
And you feel like there's a history of this. Did you guys feel the same way, that you were on Randy's side?
I wasn't on Randy's side.
No.
But I wasn't also on Frank's side. They're both jerks.
I was on Randy's side a little bit. Yeah, I mean, first off, Frank was getting his wife's name wrong the entire time, intentionally. He was disrespecting the entire family.
And then talking about their sex life.
And it's obvious that the family did not want him there at all. None of them did.
Yeah, he was imposing himself for sure.
He was imposing himself. Mm-hmm. He went in there uninvited to Thanksgiving. And yeah, Randy had enough of it. So he just wanted to hurt Frank at that point. So I get it. Yeah, I wasn't against it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I didn't like it either because, I mean, at that point already Frank's starting to maybe grow on me a little. You're seeing him be a little kinder to Charlie, who's so innocent, and almost taking him under his wing and teaching him things. And then this scene happens. So you're kind of like being pulled at both ends.
I was getting that, but like I was trying to put myself in their mindset, and it was just, man, this guy is horrible.
Yeah, no. I do like that the only thing he really reacts to is the fact that then Randy's getting Charlie's name wrong.
Right, that's the part he can't take. Or at least that's his excuse.
Or his excuse to attack.
Oh, I'm sure he's been wanting an excuse to punch Randy for a long time.
I'm sure.
You ever given any thought to a Braille watch, Frank? Stevie Wonder wears one, or do you rank on him, too? You able to lay off him, Chucky, because he's blind? Jesus Christ, another sucker who thinks this shitheel's a war hero. Well, once, maybe. Frank was earmarked for general. What do they call it, Frank, when they give you the shaft in the military?
Passed over.
Right, Frank was passed over. Our colonel here had a grenade juggling act at Fort Bragg or wherever it was they dumped him. Before going on, they'd have themselves a low-cal breakfast. A screwdriver for Frank, Bloody Mary for his partner. He's really flying in class. He gets all excited. He starts pulling the pins out. What kind of fucking lunatic juggles grenades? And all Frank lost was his eyesight. He was an asshole before.
Hoo-ah.
Now all he is a blind asshole.
Hoo-ah.
Maybe God thinks some people don't deserve to see.
And speaking of, what Randy was saying, right? He was talking about Frank's history, of how he became
Juggling?
how he became blind.
We're trying to bury the lead here.
Do you think that story that Frank has told the family was a bit more euphemistic and maybe was hiding something maybe a little darker that had actually happened? Maybe there was another reason that occurred, maybe due to like Frank's, contemptuousness or him being a bad person as he calls it. Like maybe it was something more malicious.
I thought his reaction made it seem like that's the real story. Like, it's embarrassing.
Yeah, he's pretty embarrassed by that. I mean, who knows? There could be something darker. Maybe that's the story he told the family.
Right, Randy's getting a second or third hand.
Right.
So it's possible.
It's possible, but
Maybe he wants to blow himself up.
I had that thought when it was being said. I had that thought as well.
well, according to who said that he was a miserable person,
Randy,
before and after his blindness.
Yeah,
was
it
it
was
Randy?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So maybe he was already kind of, feeling depressed and during those times. So he was being extra careless, juggling grenades. I mean, who else? Like, why else would you do that?
To cry for help.
Yeah, I think so.
I'm no fucking good, and I never have been.
I have a little tidbit here. So, do you guys remember the scene where Frank and Charlie are dancing with this girl they met at a diner? Not a diner, at a
Restaurant.
Fancy restaurant.
fancy restaurant.
Donna,
right. So that actress is Gabrielle Anwar, and she has 4th billing in this movie. Do you know who she is? Was she really famous at the time?
She's a fairly known dancer. That's as much as I know. That's why she was hired for this. And I guess she needed the most prep for this movie because I think she had to train for like 3 or 4 weeks to do this tango.
So what I read is she had to. They paid for her training, but she already knew how to do it. And funny enough, Al Pacino did not know how to tango, and apparently nearly broke her toes a few times.
Oh man,
You took that from my "Did you know?"
You want to just include your did you knows now?
No, I can give more after this.
Yeah, so it's pretty funny that the reverse was true in real life. He's trying to teach her how to dance. In the movie.
It's interesting how Al Pacino didn't train for it, yet in tango, the leading man is the one kind of making the big moves.
Yeah.
Like she's mirroring what the man is doing, kind of like also in salsa, right? Like you lead the woman.
But it's a short scene, so that's something they can prep right before. I think
It's not that short.
It's pretty short.
No, that dance is
It's
long.
like a full song tango.
Yeah.
Yeah,
that's pretty long. Yeah.
Well, he got away with it. It worked.
it really did
It works
work,
well,
and I'm
man.
really surprised he was able to do it with no training.
Mm-hmm.
I guess he can dance too. I mean,
She-
to an extent.
To your point about Gabrielle Anwar, I've definitely seen her in a lot of movies. I can't name any of them off the top of my head, but I know at least around that era I remember her being in a lot of films.
Yeah, she
So I
had
guess
to
she
have
was
been
like
in
up and
demand.
coming. Yeah,
Mhm.
for sure.
4th billing.
And also, the whole reason they went up to her was because Frank felt that Charlie, liked her. I thought she was attractive.
Sure, I thought the reason was Frank was horny, but
Well, that too. I mean, Frank's always horny, so that's always a reason. But he was trying to wingman for Charlie.
yeah,
you know.
he was.
And what I found kind of weird about it was just that I felt like she was taking the bait a little bit, like not, she.
What do you mean?
Like I thought something was gonna happen between those two characters, like Charlie and her at first, until the husband comes in, like out of nowhere, and he's just like, "Hey, I'm here sorry, I'm late," but it just felt like she was.
Oh, yeah, I get that impression as well. But it seemed intentional to me. There was like a coy smile on her face the whole time. She was playing along with them just for the good time. I don't think she was like legitimately getting...
Like interested or
exactly,
like that.
No.
Okay.
Yeah, I agree with that.
She was being nice.
Gotcha.
Another little tidbit. The tidbit section.
No!
Man, last week you took my a funny, and now this week you're taking his did you know?
Yes. How dare you?
Charlie, I don't think you're going to have this one. Charlie calls George at the Sugar Bush Lodge while waiting for Frank to finish up with his escort, right? You guys remember that scene?
Yep.
Yes.
Funny detail, Charlie is calling from a car phone in 1992. They didn't exist yet.
I had a similar tidbit.
Call back to the Annie episode.
Annie. That's right. I believe there's a scene where Warbucks is talking on a car phone.
Yes, when they're looking for Annie at the very end, yeah,
which does not exist in the 30s. That's right.
Hey, I
Very
got it
nice.
in, baby.
Very nice.
This movie takes place in 1992?
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, he doesn't say any different,
Sure.
All right, so I'll give you some did you knows.
Danny's did you knows?
Well, we're at it.
Enter jingle.
Taking my spot, huh?
Insert jingle.
I'll write one.
Beep, bop, bop, bop.
Beep. I would love that. Did you know that Jack Nicholson was actually the first one offered the role?
I did, and I wish he took it.
He would have been maybe a little more fitting.
I think so, 100%.
And I think he's a little older than Al Pacino.
Yeah.
So it would have worked a little bit better in my opinion. But he did not. But he made up for it apparently by appearing in A Few Good Men and Man Trouble and Hoffa.
Are those written by the same guy?
In that same year.
Well, why does that make up for it?
Because it was only a certain amount of roles you could take during the year.
I see what you're saying.
He chose these roles instead of this one.
Great movies.
Right. Also, Matt Damon, Ben Affleck, and Brendan Fraser tried for the role as well. They auditioned.
Mm-hmm.
Encino Man himself.
I think they would have been fine. I don't have a problem with the casting, though.
No, me neither.
Well, except Al Pacino, right?
Exactly.
Al Pacino's catchphrase, hoo-ah.
Hoo-ah.
You guys know the where it came from?
Was it another role or a real-life sergeant?
It was, Sean?
I was gonna say hoorah is like a catchphrase in either the Marines or the Army.
Right.
So I thought it was that. It's like his interpretation.
His interpretation.
Yeah.
So it was from a lieutenant colonel that actually he was working with, and he was learning from him. And according to Al Pacino, he says, "We worked every day, and he'd teach me how to load and unload a 45. Every time I did something right, he'd go, hoo-ah." And then finally I asked, "Where did you get that from?" And he said, "When we were on the line and you turned and snapped the rifle in the right way, you'd say, hoo-ah." So I just started doing it. That's it.
And doing it.
And doing it. And doing it. And never stopped.
God bless him for that.
So apparently this movie by Martin Brest is a remake of Dino Rizzi's 1974 film Profumo di Donna, which itself was adapted from a story called Bui e il Miel. I probably butchered the hell out of that, but
No, that was perfect. That's common knowledge, actually.
or Darkness and Honey, as it's interpreted by writer and journalist Giovanni.
I prefer
Arpino.
Bue
e il Miel.
This is the guttural noises part of the podcast.
Are you calling French guttural noises?
Wow.
No, your guys' interpretation of it. Your guys'
Guys, this isn't a
interpretation of
word.
it.
All right.
Oh my goodness.
So, getting back to the story, the following morning after that impossible phone call, Frank is sleeping in and looks like he may have taken some pills. I don't know if you guys had the same thought.
Oh, I
When
just
he-
thought he was depressed because it was the day.
Yeah, we find out later he hasn't taken anything. He's not drunk. But I personally thought they did a really bad job at portraying depression, if that was their goal. Because to me, he looked drugged or sick, unless I missed something. That completely missed the mark. I think if he wasn't ill and wanted to shoot himself, he would have pretended to be cheerful and sent Charlie away, as opposed to this kind of bumbling, losing his coordination act that he was putting on. I didn't understand that. I've never seen depression shown that way.
I agree. Yeah, the whole scene where he's like fumbling and falling in the sidewalk.
Wait, yeah.
And he can barely walk.
What is that?
I'm not entirely sure what that was about. Yeah, I thought maybe he had taken drugs as well. I mean, I know that when he was trying to cross the street, I think at that point he was trying to kill himself.
Yes,
right?
definitely.
He was just like
trying to get hit. Yeah.
100%.
He reached that moment where he was just like done.
But losing his coordination and falling in the bushes just didn't make sense.
That scene later didn't make sense. Maybe him falling in with the trash can, I felt was fine because I felt like he was just ready to die. And I think in those moments, I mean, your body's probably going through a traumatic moment, right? Like you're closing your eyes, you're crossing the street ready to get hit and die. You made it across. Maybe you're not quite there.
Sure, a moment of collapse, but the whole day, his whole act, he seemed like a person who's sure about what he wants. If he was sure that he wanted to shoot himself at the end of that day, he would have put on a performance that everything was okay to try and get Charlie out of the room. Because the way it happened, I don't think there's a single man, woman, or child on earth who saw this movie and didn't know what he was gonna do when he sent Charlie away. And obviously, including Charlie, he turns right back around.
Right.
Like that's not a deception.
Yeah, I don't think it was meant. Yeah, I don't know. I don't think
he
it
was
meant
trying
for
to
that.
deceive him to get him out of the room. But who's gonna be fooled by that? Nobody.
I don't know. I think because he told Charlie, and that's been on Charlie's mind because he brings it up a lot. That he just wants him out. Like this is like a gentle way of saying like I need you to get out. I don't know. I didn't really think that to be like a deception. Also, for me, I would say his like bumblingness. Like yeah, they went to that well one too many times, and him kind of like falling over and stuff. But at the same time, I read that as like he's like conflicted. Like maybe there's a reason why he could live, and like maybe he's trying to wrestle with himself, so to speak, and he's having sort of like an out of body experience where he's trying to like get control of himself. To me, I read it more as like he didn't get hit. There's like I guess like a wave of relief, but also like disappointment, and he's just kind of like, oh my goodness, like I don't even know what to do at this point. Like he's just so out of his element at this point because as you said, he knows what the right path is, but he's always chosen the wrong path, which, implies like he's always self-assured. And there's the one moment where he's not.
I could see it for a moment, but he's doing it the whole day.
Yeah.
I mean, they went to that
much.
well one too many times. Sure.
Yeah. And it goes away when he gets to drive his Ferrari and then comes right back when he's not happy. It was too cartoony.
Agreed. They should have just saved it for when he crossed the street, and that's it. That should have been the only falling down moment, not the bushes at night. That was over the top.
Definitely over time. I mean, I could see, I've known some other people in my life that have been depressed, and sometimes there's like a little bit of a wave in terms of like feelings and how they're comporting themselves. But yeah, like it's like a small sine wave there versus the film. It's like massive, peaks and troughs that I think didn't really work to its benefit.
Yeah, and it just doesn't give you flu-like symptoms or drug-like symptoms like they showed in the hotel. It's not the case. Since we're talking about negatives, I had a problem with one scene specifically, which was where they go and drive the Ferrari. I thought it was a fun scene on its own, but put into a 2.5-hour movie, I think it absolutely should have been cut out. They leave their hotel room and they come back to their hotel room. For an 11-minute scene, a fun moment isn't worth it.
Yeah, and then he's depressed all over again. It's not like
That's what I'm saying. Absolutely nothing changes. You could cut it out and just stitch those two scenes together.
Yeah, agreed. Yeah, it was definitely a bit of an extra thing. I mean, it helped, I guess, just bring Charlie and Frank a little closer together. A more father-son kind of
Yeah, it was a fun moment. I agree.
Well, again, I read that. I guess I read a lot about this film differently than you guys. I read that as that was a reason to give Charlie to then give Frank why, he should live, why he should continue. Like that was one of the two reasons why Charlie brought up that Frank should live, when they have their confrontation in the hotel room. is because like, hey, you can tango better than anyone ever seen, and you can drive a Ferrari better than anyone ever seen.
I think it was the compliment that was important. He could have brought up any positive trait.
Yeah, but that speaks to Charlie's listening ability, where he notes that the two things Frank loves is women and distant second, driving a Ferrari.
Yeah, it was a smart choice by Charlie for sure.
Yeah, but I think also by the film, I think that scene could have definitely been shortened by like 5 minutes, at least 5-6 minutes. But I think it was important to show that Charlie's actually like paying attention to this guy. He's actually listening to him. He cares about Frank. And, despite their contentious relationship for a while in the film, he does ultimately come to bond with Frank, as opposed to just saying, oh, you have a lot to live for.
Mm-hmm. But you don't think he could have showed that empathy with any other positive trait? It had to be the Ferrari scene?
It had to be the two things Frank says he loves the most, which is women and
They
Ferrari.
would have to rewrite the beginning,
that
like
line.
the plane scene,
Right.
Like, they set that up so later they can do this Ferrari scene.
Sure.
Exactly.
Yeah, I guess for me it wasn't enough. And then I also felt it was a little cartoony to have a blind man driving 70 miles per hour for like 6 minutes and not crash. Like,
Oh yeah, it's definitely incongruous with like most of the rest
he's
of the
taking
film.
blind turns and like straightening it out perfectly. It was too much.
Pun
Yeah,
intended.
Too unrealistic for sure.
Yeah, so if I was gonna compromise, if like I was the director and you were a producer saying, hey, this scene works because ABC, I would say okay, but half that time then.
Oh yeah, that's what I was saying. Yeah,
Definitely.
like 5-6 minutes shave off that for sure.
A lot of scenes needed to be cut in half, really.
Well, that's all I felt. So how about you? Why don't you tell me one of your scenes you didn't like?
I think the whole conversation with the dancer and with the tango scene, I mean, I like the scene overall, but I just felt like it dragged on too long, in my opinion. It was another, it was just another contribution to why this movie was just way too long.
Yeah,
they
fair
could have
enough.
cut the dance a little shorter.
Yeah, there you go. Those small little
And
things.
some of the conversation, they could have made it a little bit shorter as well.
But do you think the scene was necessary?
Not even. I mean, again, it's another. It's
a nice to have.
It's a nice to have scene, yeah. And it lends to, again, what he says at the very end to Frank. Oh, you're a great tango dancer. That's why you should live. But ultimately, like,
you're the only person in my life who's giving me good advice. Whatever.
Yeah, you've been like a father to me. Like that, I feel would have been stronger because they were actually pushing that a little bit. That narrative.
The father-son dynamic.
The father-son dynamic, and the fact that Charlie's father left at an early age, and
that's right.
He only has his stepfather
who he never got along with.
So like right there, it's like, why should I live? Well, because you're like a father to me now. Like that would have been stronger than you drive a really good Ferrari. You drive a Ferrari really good for a blind guy. Like,
right.
It would have been more touching.
Mm-hmm.
So what about you, Sean? Any scene that particularly worked or particularly didn't?
Frank is very explicit with Charlie early on. You do not touch me.
Which way's the door? Are you blind? Are you blind?
Of course not.
Then why do you keep grabbing my goddamn arm? I take your arm.
I grab onto you. And yet repeatedly, after that moment, Charlie grabs him and Frank does not say a word.
I did notice that, actually. It was a detail that I think they missed.
And that actually bothered me because they spend a good minute or so of Frank basically threatening to kill Charlie in the beginning, saying like, you do not touch me. That is not how this works. To then go like, every other scene after that is Charlie grabbing onto him, at least until like the relationship builds. And he just doesn't say anything about it. I'm like, oh, that's weird. Like, why didn't they talk about that?
I actually didn't notice that. I thought every time after that, when Charlie went to like guide Frank somewhere, he would actually kind of walk a little bit in front of him and kind of bump into his shoulder.
Sometimes.
And so that Frank can then put his arm out. But I don't remember. Can you name a specific moment?
When Frank is fighting Randy. Charlie literally has his hands all around Frank. And
that's a different situation.
Well, sure, but even after he gets Frank off of Randy, he's still holding on to him.
I mean, Frank, at that point, the relationship had gotten a lot stronger, right? They had just that first time they had just met, and he's a proud veteran. He feels like, I don't need anybody. I don't need to be manhandled.
Yeah, it wasn't so much that he had a mental condition where he doesn't like being touched. It was more the image of somebody grabbing him like he's disabled.
But
Sure.
But him fighting Randy, it's more like a fight in the army, and like your fellow soldiers are gonna pull you back.
That was fine.
That's more normal. That's not gonna go against. He's not gonna feel like he's a disabled guy just because he's being held back from kicking someone's ass.
But I will back Sean up that I do believe there were moments in the movie where they're walking around or whatever, and he'll just kind of grab his arm or grab his hand or something.
Yeah.
It was subtle, but there were a few.
Okay. I didn't notice them myself.
Can I say a funny?
Hit us.
Yes, you may.
Ooh. So I'm writing down a note on my phone, from the film. As Charlie's helping Frank out of the limo, Frank randomly says, "Yabba dabba doo," and I had to do a double take. It's like, what? Where'd that come from?
Well, I guess he's a fan. That's a callback. In the beginning, he says his family's the Flintstones.
That's right.
Yeah. But it was just so random, and I think it was accentuated by the fact that I wasn't paying attention for that moment, because I was like, oh, he's getting him out. He's getting him out of the limo. That's gonna be like a 30-second scene, basically. Which I thought was funny.
Yes, that's a subtle character detail.
Randy asks about Frank getting his job position wrong, and Randy asks, "Why do you always get that wrong?" And Frank says, "Because it's not important enough for me to get right."
Yeah, again, totally unnecessary.
Which made me laugh so hard. I was like, "Oh my goodness, I want to use that line now."
Yeah, just to assert dominance.
Yes, exactly. Like anytime a student is giving me lip, and be like, I'll mess up something that they said and say, "Why do you always get that wrong?" Because it's not important enough for me to get right.
Yeah, that's your nephew, guy.
That just made me think of a scene where I thought the dialogue was a little bit strange for a moment. When Charlie first goes to accept the job, he gets introduced to the family in the front of the house, because Frank lives in the back. And while is it the daughter of Frank, I believe, or
his niece?
His niece. While his niece is like walking Charlie to the back, she asks him, "Oh, so you're not going to be going out of town to see your family for Thanksgiving?" And he's like, "No." And she's like, "Good."
Yeah, that was a funny line delivery for sure.
Yeah, I was like, damn, you really want that vacation so bad.
Yeah. No, I at first I thought that was a bad line delivery, but then she's consistent with that attitude that she desperately needs somebody to watch him. That was like, okay, that was intentional.
Yeah, it did work. Yeah, because he was the only one that showed up for the job. I guess because other people know who Frank is.
Well, he knows everybody else, so they must know him. That's a detail we didn't talk about. He knows everybody at the school. He knows all the kids' fathers and families and who they work for. Like, I guess he just spends his day researching.
Your father peddles car telephones at a 300% markup. Your mother works on heavy commission in a camera store. Graduated to it from espresso machines. George Willis. That makes his father probably George Willis Sr. What's his father do?
I don't really know.
Well, I'm gonna tell you. When George Willis Sr. is not busy as $1 million man for acting a casualty, he concerns himself with his young son, George Willis Jr.
How'd you know that?
I'm a wizard.
I thought that maybe he knew like George Sr. just based on
him specifically? Like how? Because he's specifically important?
Right, exactly. Not because he knew him personally, but he was just kind of like...
No, I don't think he knows anything.
Characterizing him just based on the type of person he feels he is, based on the situation.
Right.
No, but he started mentioning specific job titles that his father holds. Like he's researching these people.
I thought he was kind of making those up.
Did you get that impression?
Yeah, I actually got that impression too, because throughout the film, Frank puts in subtle lies, like, oh, at the end when he's representing, quotes, Charlie at the hearing, he's like, I'm a good friend of his parents, and they've asked me to come in and support him, basically. So he throws in little lies here and there, like, when it helps.
Like he's like based on what he has heard about George and that situation. He just kind of like put George Sr. into this bubble.
Well, I got that, but he'd also researched Charlie before Charlie even showed up. So I got the impression that this was a normal thing for him, that he spends his day just like being nosy, basically.
Could be a bit of both, yeah. Sometimes he kind of fibs.
No, I definitely agree that he's weaving in lies, for
but
sure.
How do you, as a blind man, do that? How are you doing research
Braille.
like that?
I had Braille.
You ableist.
But Braille...
What, blind people just have to lay on the bed all day and rot?
I mean, he can hear the news. He can ask around.
He can use his ears.
Hear the news. I don't know.
What is wrong with you?
They said George Sr. was like a CEO, so maybe, his company's been in the news lately.
Perhaps. I mean, I don't know. Yeah, to me, it just felt like he was just like, oh, he's some CEO of some kind of company or this, and he's probably this, and he's probably that, and he's just kind of like...
Well, he did research Charlie for sure, so he had to have a way to do that.
Right. Well, that's true. Yeah, he did.
Maybe he's got high up friends and he just talks to people.
He just talks to people.
Yeah, maybe he knows some people in the army.
That's probably it. He probably just has a lot of people he talks to.
Yeah. You got any funnies, Alejandro?
I don't. It was...
Move on.
It was jam-packed hilarious all the way through. I couldn't pick one. You know how it is.
Yes. How many did you have?
None.
None? Wow.
I really don't have any separate funnies.
Audience, this is real. I'm looking at his tablet right now, and it says funnies centered, and then there's blank after that. So, all right.
So, now that we're at that point, I want to ask you guys, how did the final scene work for you two? Because for me, it felt too cheesy and optimistic to feel heroic. And it felt low stakes compared to the life and death situation that we had just witnessed a minute before. The point where the whole school breaks out in cheers, that's to top everything off. It was a bit too much for me because none of them were involved. It's not the winning basketball shot for their underdog team. And then to top it even more off, right after that, the pretty teacher who instantly falls in love with Frank. It was sweet and cheese one after another.
I completely agree. I thought it was all over the top. Yeah, when they started clapping, I was like rolling my eyes.
Not clapping, standing up and cheering.
Ovation.
Over these students they don't know or maybe know third hand,
Well, they did it because Frank goes, hoo-ha.
Hoo-ah!
And then that's their cue to stand
Frank's
up
speech
and
is
start
just so
hollering.
good.
It's so inspiring. Yeah, I feel like the students really wouldn't have even cared too much about the situation. I mean, unless they really, really, really hate Mr. Trask that bad.
That's
they just
what I'm thinking.
Want to see him lose. But again, that goes back to the beginning of
he's never shown to be a villain.
Yes, exactly. If they made him more of an antagonist and he's really screwing with people's lives.
Yeah, and they're like, you know what? You have too much power here. We're kicking you off the board. And he starts begging on his knees. And then everybody starts clapping. Please, one more chance.
I think they like laughing at the guy.
If they were showing that he had too much power over the education of these students and he was really abusing it and everyone knew that, or the students knew that, then maybe it would have felt more right.
It would have bridged the gap at least.
It would have bridged it a little bit. Yeah. Agreed. But that didn't make any sense. And then, oh my gosh, when...
I'm Christine Downs, Colonel Slade. I teach political science. I just wanted to tell you how much I appreciate your coming here and speaking your mind.
Colonel Slade was on Lyndon Johnson's staff, Miss Downs.
Were you? Fascinating.
We should get together, talk politics sometime. Flirted, okay?
Yes,
Flowers from a book.
that's right.
Well, Miss Down, I'll know where to find you.
The teacher randomly starts talking to Frank.
The instant love interest trope drives me crazy whenever I see it.
Yeah, it was way over the top. Here's all your reasons to live now. Here you go. Oh, man. It was,
I liked it because I felt like there was a bit of a heightened sense of reality here, that things weren't quite playing out how it probably actually would. So it was a bit leaning more into the filmic nature of the genre basically. So for me it made sense because it's we already saw a blind man driving a Ferrari down the street and not hitting anything, for example, and it's okay, if I can buy into that, I guess I can buy into all these things happening.
Gotcha.
As far as people cheering, I think they just really like to see the Mr. Trask get humiliated. Because part of me felt like they were standing up and cheering to spite him, basically, almost like they were laughing at him. So for me, it was okay, that makes sense.
I mean, I don't think that's what they were going for, though. I think
I don't think it was going for it.
But
yeah. In my head canon,
you can justify it that way, I'm sure. Yeah.
I want to add one more thing. When they say where you think it's their last goodbye between Charlie and Frank, this is before the hearing, right?
Mm-hmm.
Frank drops off Charlie at the school, I believe.
Yeah.
And he gets off. And then right before, Charlie walks away, Frank says, "Come here." And I thought he was going to go for a hug or something at first. But instead, he starts kind of like feeling his face. And at first, I was a little disappointed, right? I was like, "Oh, what happened?" Like, I thought this was going to be a more loving moment. But then, as I think about it,
it's a very loving moment.
It's extremely more loving than I initially thought, because blind people, they have to, you feel someone's face to really to see what they look like.
Yeah.
And throughout the entire film, Frank never once thought to do that for him. He never knew what Charlie looked like the entire time, and never cared to even ask.
How's your skin, son? I like my aids to be presentable.
I've had a few zits.
And I feel like that's in Frank's character to have this kind of pride, where he doesn't do that. You feel like he doesn't do that for anybody. He doesn't care enough.
Right. I took it more as a troll, like kind of like a noogie. Like, I'm gonna do that blind man thing because I can. I'm just gonna touch your face.
No, I
hate you.
Oh my goodness.
No, I saw it as like a loving gesture for sure. Like, almost like, you've earned my respect and
you've earned my touch,
my love, and
my fingers,
and I care enough to. And I care enough to know it
now.
Jesus Christ.
You've earned my fingers.
I'm trying to make this touching, damn it.
It's a very sweet moment. It's the first time Frank really wants to get to know Charlie, and he's like, "Hey,
puts his
I want
in his mouth a little bit."
Nope.
Oh man.
Nope.
Oh, sorry. Finish.
I don't think I want to.
Yeah, it's a good call.
So anyway, he finishes that, like. And then he's just like, okay, let's go. He just kind of drives off.
Yeah, there's a limit. There's a limit.
Yeah, there's a limit to how much love he can give.
Yeah.
Right.
Are we ready for scores?
Yes.
I'm going to go 6 out of 10. High highs, low lows. And without talking to Martin Brest, I'm assuming Al Pacino had a vision for his character, all his own. And for me, it was a bit incongruent with the tone of the film. I found his inflection throughout the 2.5-hour film to be grating. On the positive side, I thought the rest of the cast was fantastic, and they served the film fantastically and came off naturalistic, in my opinion. So, yeah.
I'm going to give it a 6.5. Yeah, I will agree. I mean, I really enjoyed Al Pacino's performance, but yeah, I feel like the character that he was trying to portray, that accent, the inflection, a lot of the times came off a little cringy and over the top, and brought me out of the movie. And definitely the movie was way too long for the story it was trying to tell. It had a lot of moments that should have been cut out. But overall, great performances. I like the story. I like the moral of the story. And yeah. How about you, Sean?
Oh boy. He's got a big smirk across his face.
I give it 8.5 hoo-ha's out of 10.
Nice.
A long movie like this can be the death knell for my enjoyment of the film and, quite frankly, my focus, but I was engaged throughout, and I think that's a very commendable but exemplary thing that this film did. There was no scene that bored me. Yes, I was uncomfortable in the beginning with Frank's relationship with Charlie and how he treated him, but I really grew to enjoy both of them and their relationship together, and I felt like they both, not to take a cheesy, parlance from other movie, but they completed each other.
You had me at hello.
And I thought that the film really worked to its benefit to really just focus in on those two characters as opposed to bringing in other characters. So for me, I thought it was really good. I would want to see this movie again in a few years, and I can't say that about a lot of films that I watch. So.
Sick.
All right.
Next week, we're watching Eyes Wide Shut, 1999, directed by the indomitable Stanley Kubrick. A Manhattan doctor embarks on a bizarre, night-long odyssey after his wife's admission of unfulfilled longing. You can watch it on Blu-ray, Netflix, or Amazon Prime. Sean, where can the people find us?
You can find us on Instagram and Twitter at Ardent Cinema. And if you're listening to us on your favorite podcast app, please give us a 5-star rating, leave a review. And if you're listening to us on YouTube, please hit the like button, hit subscribe, and click the little notify bell so that you're made aware of when new episodes drop every week.
All right, everybody. Goodbye.
Wait, is this it?
Hoo-ah!
Hoo-ah.
Long live the new flesh.